Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cutting Through Conversations that Go Beyond the Plate. Today, we're going to take up a slightly sensitive issue, something that is quite topical, something that a lot of people are hesitant to talk about, and something that actually affects people very, very deeply, very personally. So we've got Thomas Zacharias, who's going to be our speaker today, and Thomas has just joined in. So let me just bring him on. Um, and yeah, so as I was saying, something that affects everyone. Hey, Thomas,
Hi, Antoine. It's good to
how
see
are
you.
you? How are you doing? Yeah, you too.
I'm good.
Good. So yeah, as I was saying, something that is always hidden away, that is not kind of given enough space. Not enough people deal with it, and we are going through difficult times in the restaurant industry. We are looking at a very lean period, so it's something that we need to really talk about now more than ever. I'm going to quickly introduce Thomas, though I'm quite sure that in the food world, Thomas doesn't require much of an introduction. So Thomas has been a chef for many years. He started his career out with Olive, I believe, and then moved on from many places. He's been the executive chef of the Bombay Canteen from the time that it opened, and recently he's been made a partner. So congratulations on that, Thomas, and good to have you here with us. So a lot of people get into the food industry. A lot of people want to become chefs, but they don't quite understand what the life of a chef involves and how difficult the industry can be. So just to get a sense of, broadly what the life of a professional chef is, tell us what a normal day or a normal year would be for you.
So I think the life of a chef kind of evolves and changes through the career. Like what you have to deal with and go through in the early years is very different from what happens later. But typically, something that's relatively common in the industry is that you have longer hours. You
Hmm.
tend to work on weekends, on holidays when everyone else is probably
Right.
has time off. So it comes with a fair deal of sacrifices, and there's this notion in the industry that you need to do these long hours to kind of get somewhere.
Right.
Um,
Right.
then, of course, like I think the stereotype that a lot of kitchens are negative and abusive is partially true. I've seen that myself.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's kind of there. Although things have changed over the years,
Oh,
but
that's
it's
good.
not like that. It's not like that's been kind of that's kind of gone away. And then there's the pressure, there's the stress of having to perform, and if it doesn't come from someone above you, it's usually
Hmm.
self-imposed. Like for me myself, I am pretty ambitious when it comes to myself, and I've imposed these pressures of having to like keep doing stuff, keep pushing myself, and
Right.
again, then you're kind of playing catch up constantly. So that's there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a very competitive industry. I mean, not simply you're competing with others, you're also competing with your own colleagues, because moving up is not very, very easy.
Yeah, I mean the competition it differs from one restaurant or one kitchen to the other. It also depends on the leadership and how whoever's running that kitchen kind of what the environment that person has set for the place is. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean it's either you're competing with your colleagues or you're competing with yourself. So there is a sense of competition and a sense to keep like outdoing yourself.
Yourself. Yeah. And there's not enough of an outlet there's not enough of a safety valve, is my sense of the industry. There's not, because you're not spending time with friends, you're not spending time with family, when everyone's, as you pointed out, everyone's partying, you're kind of busy at work. That, I'm sure, gets to a lot of people, gets to a lot of chefs as well.
Yeah, I mean, it can be tough. And again, I think that's where the topic of mental health comes in. And again, I just want to like put out a few disclaimers. I've
Hmm.
had my own share of mental health issues over the years. But ultimately, my reality will be different from someone else's. And
Absolutely.
what the ways I've tried to deal with it will be very different from what someone else will be. And that's why when you kind of approach me to do this live session, I wanted to say yes, because I think it's an important conversation to have, especially because it's hardly ever talked about in the context of the hospitality industry. Um,
Absolutely.
and I mean, it's hard for me to talk about it. I've had a lot of back and forth in my own head over the last
Hmm.
2 weeks since we discussed this.
Right.
But again, I think it's important to kind of address it because it's very rarely spoken about. And again, my like, just to tell you a little bit about my own journey.
Hmm.
I've had my own share of kind of issues over the years. I think when I was in my late teens, probably in college, I have battled depression, and that really doesn't have much to do with the industry. Um,
True. Hmm.
and I know this because I used to maintain a blog back then, which I
Hmm.
still have access to. And just reading that, it's very clear that that young boy was going through a lot. But this
Hmm.
was, I mean, we're talking about 15, 16 years ago, when forget talking about destigmatizing mental health. We didn't really even acknowledge it back then. It wasn't really acknowledged
Absolutely.
as a problem in society.
Yeah.
And then over the years, I think that, I mean, I had a job where I was bullied by someone in the kitchen. And again, it must have seemed trivial to everyone else, but to me, like, I took it pretty badly.
Hmm.
And again, so over the years, like at every stage, I think later on, maybe in the last 4 or 5 years, I have kind of, like I said earlier, I've kind of set certain expectations for myself, and again, it got to me after a point, and it took me a long while to really acknowledge that there was a problem.
Yeah.
But when I finally did, what I decided to do was, I actually went for a Vipassana retreat.
Okay.
And that was based on a conversation I had had several years prior with a friend of mine who said that it really helped her. And
Hmm.
it actually worked wonders for me. I came back with a sense of clarity, a sense of peace and calm. And that was, I mean, this was just 2 years, 2.5 years ago. And it was the first time in my life that I actually tried any form of meditation or mindfulness method or technique. But it
Right.
really, I mean, it really helped. And I kind of continued meditating even after I came back. But it's still, I mean, like, whatever kind of demons I was dealing with kind of came back. And I think it was only about 6 to 8 months ago that I started seeing a therapist.
Okay.
I basically
Hmm.
seek professional help, and I started seeing a therapist, and that again for me has helped immensely as well.
Okay.
So again, and it's unfair to kind of blame whatever mental health issues I've been facing on the profession or the industry per se, because it's hard to kind of tell what's causing it.
True.
But you can, as leaders, make changes that'll kind of help.
Yeah. Well, Thomas, you've dealt on a lot of very heavy subjects. You've talked about the stigma, which is something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. You've talked about seeing a therapist, the importance of having good leadership. Um, Also, yeah, I mean, I do understand that this is not an easy topic to speak about, even for anybody. I mean, it doesn't have to be a chef; it could be anyone. I have my own anxiety issues. I'm a journalist. There are problems that I am not properly kind of coping with right now. I'm really glad that you are seeing a therapist, and I think, like you also mentioned to start out with, this is your unique story. This is how you're dealing with it. Uh, Everyone has unique stories, so don't necessarily kind of believe that the conversation that Thomas and I are having will directly affect you in the same kind of way. You have your own issues to deal with. but I think it's really, really important. One is to recognize that you have issues. And secondly, I think what Thomas talked about is seeing a therapist, asking for help. That, and I think, Thomas, you'll agree with me that that action of realizing that you are vulnerable
Yeah.
and that you need help, that's a big, big transition to make, isn't it?
It is, and it takes a lot out of you. I think what's important, like you said, first step is to acknowledge that you have issues. The second step, I think, is to at least know that seeking help is an option.
Right.
That option is out there for you. I think all of us have different kind of a different pace of how we deal with these things, and it's
Sure.
perfectly okay to have your own pace and deal with it however best it works out for you. But I think thankfully we are starting to live in a society where we're talking about this a lot more, and there's a lot of positive content shared around seeking professional help. And so knowing that as an
Right.
option is and there's no real age. I mean, everyone's problems are kind of different. I mean, what might be
Yeah.
a trivial to someone might be like really problematic for me. So
Yeah.
everyone's
Yeah.
realities are different,
Absolutely.
but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things that you realize and you say that, and that actually causes some kind of dissonance in you because you wonder, what am I really getting upset about? Is it really something that merits being, get upset? And then you say, no, I'm the one who's at blame, and it's not this thing. And just accepting that all of us are different and we all have different triggers is something also important to realize.
Yeah, and I mean, what eventually has also helped me is these certain things that I do every day, which like for example, as soon as I wake up, I don't really check
Hmm.
any devices. I kind of keep screens away. So I start with a
Oh,
certain
that's a big
sense of
thing.
I started with a certain sense of peace and calm.
Hmm.
And the first thing I do is I obviously make myself a cup of coffee, and then I get down to kind of journal. So I just like write down whatever thoughts come to me first thing I wake up.
Okay. Okay.
And my writing is hardly legible,
Hmm.
but I'm just like kind of offloading whatever I'm carrying. And the second thing I do is meditate, and both of these things uh, kind of again on a day to day basis, like you said, like allows me to introspect a little bit and acknowledge what's happening with me.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I feel like that's really helped me. And then of course I mean other things like surrounding myself with like if I show you right now, surrounding myself with
Hmm.
lots and lots of plants.
Okay.
Uh, um, things like music and art, and so you have to kind of uh, try all these different things and see what works for you. And again,
Yeah.
there's no one right answer to this.
There's no one right answer. Absolutely. That's a really good point. I mean, that everyone has a trigger point. Everyone has different kinds of de-stressors. For me, it's my plants as well and my dogs, and that really, really helps.
I
You know,
wish I could have a pet.
yeah. I
A
mean,
dog would really help, but unfortunately, I live alone, so I don't have that option.
no, I'm telling you, dogs are really one of the most fabulous stress
Yeah,
busters. But even then, despite that, I mean, it's really you that is going through it. It's only you that who can understand how to kind of work through this. But I wanted to talk a little bit about journaling. I hear a lot about it, and a lot of people who have health issues talk about it. Can you tell me what exactly is journaling and what is it that you're required to do, and how does it really help you?
yeah. So I'll tell you about how I kind of see it and how I perceive it. And I actually got this kind of idea from a book called The Artist's Way.
Okay.
It's actually, and in this book, it lists down two exercises that you kind of need to do every day to bring out your inner creator. But I
Okay.
feel like as a kind of as an effect of practicing it, I've realized it helps give me a lot of peace and calm as well. And what it basically tells you is that you constantly carry a lot of thoughts and feelings and emotions with you, and very you don't have a daily way of offloading that. You don't have a way to kind of put that out there. And journaling for me is a kind of outlet in that sense. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's important to kind of have a certain. I mean, at least for me, I journal knowing that whatever I'm writing in my journal will never be read by anybody.
Fair enough.
So it's
Hmm.
writing without abandon, right? Just putting it down, and sometimes when I'm like writing about something really sensitive, I just scribble. So, and I don't really go back and read what I'm writing.
That's what I
But
was going to ask you. I mean, do you go back to it?
I don't. It's just a way from. It's just an outlet for me. And again, it might be different for different people, but I've realized that this is what works for me.
Okay, okay. Um, Thomas, we haven't actually talked about some of the issues that you actually felt. I mean, what was it that you actually went through? And you talked about being bullied, but when you were in depression, what did you feel like? I mean, what was it like for you?
Actually, I mean, if you're talking about my like late teens phase, I don't really remember uh, much about it. But I have this
Hmm.
record. I used to write a blog post every 2 or 3 days for a good year and a half. And again, there's a lot of content which, when I read back, it's very hard to read. But I don't recognize that young boy who's going through.
Yeah.
But it's just basically, I mean, not being able to articulate properly or not understanding why I'm feeling a certain way.
Hmm.
It is just this sense of like feeling low, and it. I mean, it's a clear cry for help, um, but it's just out there into the universe where. And this is in 2003, so nobody was really reading blogs. I mean, reading my blog. It was pretty much an anonymous blog. Um,
Right.
and I think, I mean, at a later phase in my career, I've felt low at times when, I mean, sometimes you just don't know. You don't know why you're feeling a certain way.
Right. Yeah.
At many times in my life, I've not been able to kind of understand why, and that's why in the last 6 to 8 months, seeing a therapist has helped, because you kind of articulating a lot of your thoughts, and it's basically a two-way conversation you're having with someone who has helped other people deal with this before, and hopefully you'll be able to find some answers.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of this, a lot of what we're dealing with and how we're dealing with comes from these conversations that we have with ourselves. And sometimes, and in many cases actually, and where the depression and anxiety stem from, is that we tend to be really, really hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
We tend not to be able to forgive trivial things, even. Is that something that you would identify with?
Absolutely. I mean, I hold myself to very, very high standards, and I'm not very forgiving, and that's something I'm working with. But actually, to be honest, over the years, I've not really, until I really started dealing with this, I didn't really do a lot of introspection when it comes to my own kind of thoughts and feelings. I pretty much,
Hmm.
my defense mechanism was to bottle it up, which now I
Right.
realize
Yeah.
isn't healthy. But
Hmm.
so I mean, but I mean, in retrospect, I know that I've always been kind of hard on myself and mostly unforgiving.
Hmm.
And I mean, that's a work in progress as well, to kind of change that.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anything that you are doing? I'm sure you're working with a team, you're working multiple teams. You interact quite often with students. I know that this isn't a topic, obviously, that comes up, but do you ever get a sense that you see someone or you notice something, you notice a habit, and you feel like, okay, well, I need to have a conversation with this person? Does that
Absolutely.
ever come up?
And I think as leaders in the industry, there are a few things that I think. I mean, for me, I keep in mind. One is to have an open line of communication. I think the people who are working below you need to know that they can come up and talk to you, and you're kind of approachable in that sense.
Hmm.
I think it's important to treat people with respect. And again, it's important that that kind of respect, that kind of behavior is shared by the rest of the team as well.
Hmm.
Because, like I said, I mean, the guy who was bullying me, for example, was not the head chef. But
Right.
all you need is one bad apple in the team, and who can bring someone else down.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's important as leaders to try and make the work environment positive and nurturing, rather than just negative and abusive,
Yeah.
which again is pretty prevalent in the industry, just by virtue of like, um, I think a lot of us have worked in kitchens like that, and it's a vicious cycle. It just keeps. I mean, you think that that's how you've been treated, so then you end up treating someone else
You
the
feel
same
it.
way. But you need to break
Right.
the
Right.
cycle somewhere. Um, and I think again, as leaders in the hospitality industry, I think, or leaders in any field, at least for me, I know that I need to take care of my own mental health before I can kind of be available to help anyone else who's going through something. Because if I'm not okay
Yeah.
myself, I can't really help someone else.
Yeah.
And I think we all, I mean, as we all need to be kind and empathetic, and we should kind of coach our subordinates or the next line of leaders to kind of be the same.
Yeah. It's very interesting that you're talking about bullying because that's one of the reasons that I didn't join the industry actually. Because I had a terrible sous chef at the Taj, the main kitchen, and I said, well, I don't want to deal with this life, and I don't want to deal with this pay. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And the thing is that someone met him many years later. He's the corporate chef for a big chain of hotels, and he now just brushes it off and says that, oh, it was something that you did at that point, and that was just the way that the industry runs. And you
Exactly,
know,
but it's not okay. I mean, and it's time that we started uh, calling each other out for that. I mean, it's not okay. That kind of behavior is not okay, because that's not good for anyone. Let alone, I mean, the people you're kind of working with, but also yourself. I mean, when you're kind of spewing negativity, you're kind of holding that with yourself as well.
yeah, yeah. One of the other things that is a bit delicate is that you're in a terrible place. Someone identifies that you're in a bad place. They want to help you, but there is a sense that they're nagging you.
Yeah.
They don't quite know how to deal with you. You don't know how to deal with them as well. I mean, what does one do? I mean, I know there is no perfect answer for this, but
I'm
do you?
smiling because I'm sure some of my friends feel the same way. Um, Again, I don't think there's a right answer to this. I think again, just letting that other person know that you're around to listen to, if you kind of want to talk. Um, um, yeah, I mean, it can come across as nagging, and sometimes it can be detrimental to someone else, because if you're constantly being reminded by someone saying that, are you okay, are you okay, how are you
Exactly.
feeling,
Yeah. Yeah.
it can get a bit much. So I think, again, there's no right answer, but and it depends on your relationship with that person, really. But as long as the person knows that they have someone to reach out to, I think that covers a lot of ground.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I think Tiffin Tales has just said that sometimes it's just important just to listen and to make yourself available for the person without without expecting them to perhaps unburden on you if they don't want to, just kind of to be around. I think that's one useful strategy.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely, I agree.
yeah. So did you try various other ways of unwinding before you realized that meditation and working with plants was something that worked for you? Was it things that perhaps didn't work for you and which perhaps people had recommended?
Not really. I mean, what didn't work for me is that I didn't do anything about it. What didn't work for me was the fact that I bottled it up, and I wasn't, and it's still hard for me to address it, and it's still hard for me to kind of deal with it. I've not fully made peace with it, but
No, I don't think one actually does. I think it's a
yeah,
very long and slow process. It's taken years to build up. It's
yeah.
going to take years to.
But I think for me, that those 10 days of Vipassana was came as a shock to my system because I mean that again just purely personal experience, but um, just getting time away and just completely cutting off and just being in that space and just being with myself. Um, it really opened up a lot. So I mean that worked for me. That was the first time I really dealt with it.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Is there anything else that, I mean, you've done at a corporate level or at an institutional level? Are there any processes that you all have put in place to allow people to kind of reach out to you or to reach out to the management team?
I think what we've done is, again, like I said earlier, to have an open line of communication.
Hmm.
And again, whether that is with us managers or with whoever handles our HR, that's one. But I think apart from process, I think the work culture or the environment is very key to how people kind of feel when they're working, and that's
Hmm.
something that we've consciously addressed as well. Apart from that, we've done
So,
things
so
like
Thomas, when you say you've consciously addressed, would you give me a specific example of how you've addressed it?
consciously address the work culture. So for example, if we see that there are bad apples who are
Right.
kind of, then we make sure we kind of tackle that head on and see and find some sort of resolution. Whether it means to kind of coach that person or to um, um, if that person needs to be disciplined, if that person needs to be let go. But ultimately, kind of acknowledging the problems that and any industry, any restaurant will. There's a constant series of stimuli that's happening. There's a constant. There's so many moving parts at all given points of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just being alert and cognizant of what's happening itself is important. So that's why I said like having making sure that one, you carry those values of being kind and respectful and empathetic, but also making sure that your next in line, the leaders that kind of manage the rest of your team, do as well. But
Hmm.
we've also done like other things, which again, for example, we try to switch over to a 5-day work week, which I think we are one of the few restaurants in the country that do that. But we wanted to do that to kind of allow our team to have some semblance of balance between their work life and their personal life. Because,
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
said, we've forever kind of just resorted to the fact that this is a tough industry and there's no balance and there's no personal life and you're sacrificing a lot.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, but again, we're trying to kind of find, and it's not easy. It's not easy when you're running a business to make these decisions. But I think trying to constantly look for ways to make things better for everyone is kind of key.
Okay. So one of the things that, and I'd like to end with this is that, we're going into difficult times. A lot of the industry is going to we're going to see a lot of closures, a lot of employers, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of employees are going to go through a rough time. Is there a message that you would put out to people uh, who are going to see a difficult phase of their life coming up?
I think we've covered a lot, but I mean, in closing, I think I want to say again, there is a certain amount of introspection that is needed. Whether that means just taking time out to think, or journaling, or talking to someone to first identify if there is a problem, if you're going through something, and then obviously seeking some sort of help. But I think the larger conversation also needs to be had around industry leaders, like people who are running big
Hmm.
establishments, to also acknowledge this as a problem and find ways to deal with it. And again, I know that we are having this conversation on social media, but it's also important to have these conversations at the workplace. It's important to,
Yeah.
and again, those key values of just being kind, just being empathetic, just being there for people. I
Yeah.
think Yash has pointed out that like very often in our industry, it's you always see that you're disciplined or you're kind of told when you're doing something wrong, but it's a little rarer when you're kind of applauded for what you do,
Product. Yeah.
and recognizing like good values in your team members, and kind of recognizing people on your team who eschew the values that you set out for
You set out to. Yeah.
is also important.
Sure, sure. So we've got a question also which says a word for new graduates in hospitality. I think a lot of this is, if you listen to it, has a lot of good words for, but if there's anything else that you'd like to add for freshers, for people who are going to join and who are aspiring to become chefs. Sorry, Thomas. Um, Hi.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
get
So
the
I was
last
saying,
question? Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
I was saying that now is as difficult and challenging a time as ever, and no one really has the answers of how this is all going to play out. But kind of try and take this time to take care of yourself, learn, continue to learn from resources that are available to you. Once you do actually get started working, like I said. Irrespective of the work environment, this is a difficult kind of profession to be in because of the way because of the systematically the way it's set up, and there will be hard days, there will be tough times. It's important to one know that a lot of those are just phases that will pass, and
Mm.
two, to be able to kind of maybe reach out to someone who can help you.
Sure. Okay. Uh, well, Thomas, thanks so much for sharing this. I know it is never easy. It's never easy to talk to someone in person. It's even more harder to talk on a public platform with other people, and to let other people know that you are vulnerable, that you have been vulnerable, or that you are going through things. So I do really appreciate it. I know that whoever's been on this conversation and who's listened in also is appreciates it, and I do believe that this is an important starting point. Whether the industry takes the conversation forward or not, I think we should kind of push them to, and that there is a lot more to be said. Just to add, to sum up, I think for everyone, Thomas has shared his personal journey, as he mentioned. It's really important for you to figure out your personal journey, to figure out what are the things that you are dealing with. It is also important to see a professional therapist and to get professional help. That makes a world of a difference. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Thomas. And I will see all of you guys on Wednesday, where we're going to be talking about something much lighter, something more interesting, and that is about moving to cage-free eggs with Ashok Khanna. So thanks, everyone. Thank you so much, Thomas.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, take care.
Bye.